Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our June 28th City of Port Colborne Council meeting. I'll call this meeting to order, and at this time I'll call on WeeStreem to provide our national anthem. And again, we thank the McKay Choir for that. We have one proclamation this evening, Council. Let me pull that up. I'll have Councillors Bagu and Bodner move that I, Mayor William C. Steele, do hereby proclaim July 28th, 2021 as World Hepatitis Day in the City of Port Colborne. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that's carried. Thank you, Council. I'll have Councillors Beauregard and Kalaloff move the agenda. Is there any questions with regards to the agenda? Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. That's carried. Disclosures of interest. Councillor Beauregard has a disclosure of interest on item 7.5 and the corresponding bylaw at 19.1. Any further conflicts? Seeing none. Approval of the minutes. Council, we have 3 sets of minutes. The regular meeting of Council June the 14th, 2021, our public meeting of June the 21st, 2021, and the special meeting of Council on June 21st, 2021. I'll have Councillors Bruno and Danch move the minutes. Are there any questions to any of those minutes? Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. And that's carried. At this time, we have items pulled for separate discussion: 7.1, 7.2, 7.3, 7.4, 7.5, 7.6, 7.7, 7.8, 7.9, 7.10, and 8.3. Councillors, any further items to be pulled? Seeing none, all in favor of those items not being pulled this evening? That's carried. Actually, I'll have Councillors Beauregard and Bodner move those items. Now, all those in favor, please raise your hand. That's carried. Thank you, Council. Okay, on to item 9, presentations. There are none. Delegations, we do not have any delegations this evening, so I'll get into my mayor's report. As active COVID cases continue to drop and vaccination rates continue to rise, the province has announced that we will be moving to step 2 of the roadmap to reopening on Wednesday, June the 30th. This will allow larger outdoor gatherings, personal care services such as barbershops and hair salons to open, increased table sizes for outdoor dining, and increased capacity for retail shopping. We are expected to remain in step 2 for at least 21 days. If you have not yet received your vaccine, go to the ontario.ca website to book an appointment or call 1-888-999-6488. Everyone over the age of 18 is now eligible to receive their second dose. If you have any questions in regards to City Hall services or would like to report a concern, you can contact a customer service representative Monday to Friday from 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. by calling 905-835-2900 or via email customerservice@portcolborne.ca. Alternatively, you can visit our website www.portcolborne.ca and submit a service request or inquiry by clicking on the Request a Service tab located on the top right corner of your website page. Whether you are a citizen, business owner, or city councilor, we are here to assist you and provide customer service excellence through all service channels, internally and externally. In-person appointments will be scheduled for essential and time-sensitive services. Where possible, services will continue to be provided through remote means. Pre-COVID, we always invited retiring staff members to a council meeting to celebrate and thank them for their service to the City of Port Colborne. Unfortunately, we have been unable to do that in the past 6 months, so I'd like to take this time to publicly thank those who have retired since January 1st, 2021. Combined, they provided 117 years of service to the citizens of Port Colborne. Leah Raish, 14 years, Assistant Librarian. Margaret Cook, 34 years, Assistant Librarian. Doug Lampman, 17 years, Equipment Operator in the Arena. Bill Eberly, 32 years, Utilities Crew Clerk. Tom Cartwright, 20 years, Fire Chief, and then most recently our Director of Community Safety and Enforcement. I would also like to acknowledge Jennifer Maurice, our Records and Dispatch Clerk in Public Works, who celebrated 50 years of service with the city last week. Jennifer continues to work, keeping track of our employees out on the road and answering calls from the public. This is quite a milestone. When Jennifer started, I was 9. So on behalf of council and all the citizens, we not only thank Jennifer for her 50 years, but again, we publicly thank all those who have retired since January and gave most of them quite a bit of years to their career here at the City of Port Colborne. Thank you. The City of Port Colborne is asking residents to participate online with the virtual event Explore Port Colborne. This event will provide some great ways to get outdoors, get active, and get to know Port Colborne a little better. You'll have roughly 1 month to complete as many challenges as you can. Starting on June the 28th, Explore Port Colborne virtual event will be live on the Goose Chase app until Friday, July the 30th, 2021 at midnight. The virtual Explore Port Colborne event will include activities that involve getting out to see all that Port Colborne has to offer. Activities include visiting parks, utilizing trails, visiting the museum, supporting local businesses, and so much more. Info, including the access code, is available at Events and Festivals, City of Port Colborne page on our website. Also, the Tall Ship Play Fair, which has been in Port Colborne quite a few times over the years, it will be docked along West Street this July 1st, Canada Day. They will allow the public to have deck tours from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. Masks are required. Maintaining social distancing is a requirement, and the crew will accommodate one family at a time. For more information about how to book a tour, this will be available shortly if it's not already there on our website. That is the end of my mayor's report, and I thank you and thank everyone, and please stay safe. Our regional councillor, Barb Butters, is unable to join us this evening. Are there any questions for myself or for the region? Seeing none. Staff remarks. I'll go to staff. Staff in here, anything? Nothing? Staff online, anybody have anything for council? Okay. Councillor's remarks. I'm going to start at my top left on my screen. Councillor Baggy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I got 3 items. First one is I brought up the last council meeting about the status of the 2 portable yellow radar signs that we approved last budget, and an update was supposed to come, but has not arrived yet. So if I could get an update on that, Mr. Mayor, I'd be happy.
Thank you. Mr. Kawamoto.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, my apologies to the counselor. They have been purchased. We were just waiting on some arrival, so I will get the time frame for those and send those out to council. My apologies.
Thank you. Councillor Bagu.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The second one, this has been going on since last council, actually. The former mayor brought it up a few times, and I brought it up to this council a few times. It's regarding the city welcome and service club signs pushing our cities. And maybe Mr. Kalamuto wasn't here yet, but Mr. Shipakowski was looking into it, and I just haven't heard anything. So asking for an update on those, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Kawamoto.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Manager Shipowski has been working with the MTO diligently. We do have a sign selected. We are just trying to get the approval from the MTO to actually put these signs up, and timing of that, and then we will get those up as soon as we get the approval from the province.
Great, thank you. Councillor Bagu.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Kalamuto. Last item, Mr. Mayor. The paving repairs timeline and list. Mr. Kalamuto, I required that, I requested a time frame on when the company contractor is going to be in the city. I just wanted to make sure there's two residents that one was supposed to be repaired last year. They repaired the wrong spot, and he was assured it would be fixed this year, 100%. And I just don't want us to screw up again and miss them. Every time it rains, I get a phone call, Mr. Mayor, and inviting me out to see the big lake in front of his place. So if I could get the Mr. Kalamuto to give me the timeline for the paving repairs, and actually the list for all city council would be helpful. This way councilors would know where the repairs are going to be made throughout the city, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Kawamoto.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we do have a list that can be forwarded to the councillors. We expect that the contractor should be in the next couple of weeks. However, with that list, there is no prioritizing within the list. So we don't have the specific dates as of yet, but we do have the list that will be completed this year. I would also ask through the mayor to the councillor if you can forward me the particular address. I'll make sure that it will not be forgotten this year.
Thank you, Mr. Kawamoto. Mr. Bagu, or Councillor Bagu?
I'm good, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Councillor Bodnar.
All good here, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Claylough.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I just had to ask, actually this is to you, I think, an update regarding number 58 highway closure. You were going to look into it. I know it's been closed, but you were going to see if there was any possibility of having that delayed, or can you tell us the update as to why it could be, or what's going on with it?
Basically, they were starting 2 days after our meeting. Both the CAO and I discussed this, and getting in touch with the proper authorities, the ministry would not delay this project. They were ready to go. So it was starting, I believe, the Wednesday after our meeting, which is what they've done. So they weren't going to delay it, believe me.
Okay, thank you. And the other one, again, it's regarding closures and different things. I know how difficult it all is with the canals and everything. We've seen all of it going on this week, and I know that Mrs. Giles has been trying to keep everybody apprised of what's going on. I've heard some frustration from people trying to explain to them that we don't always know ahead of time. But, you know, any updates as quickly as possible are greatly appreciated, is what I've been told. And that's about it. I think we all knew that anyway. And I think that's all for me right now. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Desmarais.
Sorry, I was muted there. Just a couple of items this evening. First, I've had some complaints from residents on Johnson Street and on Christmas Street with respect to speeders. There's a lot of people driving along there at reckless rates of speed. A lot of children on those two streets. So if we could bring some more attention to that, it would be appreciated. People have asked for signs As we all know, signs don't do a lot of good, but whatever can be done, we'd appreciate that. So there was that one, and the other item I have is about our business directory online. I had a call from a couple that were in from out of town and were looking for a restaurant. And they just wanted to be able to have an idea of what restaurants were in town, what kinds of menus they offered, price ranges, that sort of thing. So they were looking for a way to access Port Colborne and restaurants. And they couldn't do that. They said that our business directory made them actually go through from A to Z, and that is not how they wanted to deal with it. They just want to be able to do restaurants and have all the restaurants come up at once. I did try it as well, and I wasn't any more successful. So I'm wondering if we could rejig the business directory, or if there's another way to do that, maybe we could plainly explain how that is done.
Thank you, Councillor. CAO Louis?
Yes, through your worship, to Councillor Desmarais. I know when we had the company, the website was recently redeveloped by a company called eSolutions, and we spent a lot of time on the business directory, like the template, like what box, how searches work and how you tick boxes. If it's okay with you, I'd like to have a chance to go back to staff and see if there's something that can be improved or tinkered with, and then maybe report back at the next council meeting.
Absolutely, that would be great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Great, thank you, Mr. Louis. Councillor Desmarais, with regards to Johnson and Christmas, are there any blocks in particular, or is it pretty much the full kind of length of
pretty
those
much
two
the
streets?
whole thing, but I would say that it tends to be more the more easterly portions of the roads.
Okay, I'll make sure I know, let the staff sergeant know, and he can get that on his,
Great.
for the duty rosters. He puts those up for the officers when they're coming on shift. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bruno?
Thank you.
Thank you, Worship. I want to come back to the 58 road closure, but more importantly, to move forward through the rest of the summer period and until that Highway 58 bridge is fixed. So if I could start through you to Mr. Kawamoto. Mr. Kawamoto, do you or your department get notification on any road repairs or closures or impediments on Highway 58, Highway 140, or Highway 3 from any of those appropriate entities?
Mr. Kawamoto?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, I do not receive any particularly to me. So I do receive them when other staff have received them, whether it be through the CAO or whether it be through communications. I receive them after them.
Thank you. But through you to Mr. Mayor, I'm just wondering what Councillor Califf alluded to the fact that Nancy keeps up to date with the Seaway and when that's happening. I don't know if you know. Can we find out if there are any more 1 or 2 day closures? I mean, I just can't imagine at this point a bridge being up, another bridge closed for service, and that traffic coming in off of 140, then all trying to get across one bridge that then would be open. Is there anything your office can do, or Chris's, to ensure that while 58 is down to 1 lane, that there are no short-term closures other than emergencies that can happen on our bridges in the summer season until that 58 project is closed? And could we perhaps get a report back on that or pending closures? I mean, I just think that's a recipe for a big problem in the heat of the summer. A bridge goes up and a bridge is down, and that traffic fighting for one.
Yep. So, Councillor, what we can do is the CAO and I can approach the ministry and also the region too. But more importantly, we've recently had a discussion with Canadian National Railway with regards to their future work and working more in partnership along the rail line that really runs in the north end of the city, but knowing what projects they have coming up, we did have a discussion with the CAO, myself, Mr. Long, and Mr. Cotton last week, and we talked about a number of issues, and we'll make sure that when our staff and the Seaway get together, that we bring that up for them just to give us an update. Seaway actually is pretty good on giving, especially Nancy in our office, updates of projects that are coming or bridge closures, so those get out pretty quick. But there are some more things to be done there. But as far as the ministry and the region go, and again, the region does send out their communications quite in advance in any planned work. So but we'll work with the ministry and see if we can get, you know, what we talked with CN was, you know, really a 5 and 10 year plan on where they're going. So not only knowing when they're going to shut something down, but if they're going to be doing work in an area where we're going to be doing road work, we want to do the road work one year and they rip it all up the next year for a rail line. So we are working with other parties for that. So we'll take that to, specifically in this case, it's the Ministry of Transportation with regards to the 3 provincial highways that go through Port Colborne. So
I guess my concern is not that they will let us know when it's happening, that during this particular closure, that we will let them know now that we don't want to see any short-term or temporary closures until after 58 is finished. It is fine and dandy to get notice that they're happening, but surely there may be the opportunity that they can push a 2-day bridge job 60 days ahead or 45 days ahead than their current scheduled time. But I think we need to be proactive this much earlier. I respect what you're saying about, you know, talking to the railroads and everybody else, but we are now in a particularly different situation with a 2-month closure. So I'd like to know if we can send a notice that we would like to see no further construction delays during the summer season while 58 is closed. And that particularly is to the Seaway in this case. And hopefully they will want to work with us. Just one last thing. I looked in, so if you are at Netherby in 140, you see that while the temporary lights are not, are up there, the construction sign and drainage cloth that's along the road indicates to me that there is going to be construction there. And it is not just that sign due to the putting up of the temporary lights. And indeed, there is going to be either a roundabout, some off ramps, or something going on at that intersection. I don't know when, but it wasn't explained to me when, but that is on the schedule. What I want to be sure of is that the left hand and the right hand know what's going on, and depending on who's doing that job. And if we could secure ahead of time some assurances that that job won't start, and it would seem logical that they wouldn't, particularly if it's MTO and they've got one road down, but I don't want to leave things to logic in this case. And I'm just wondering if we can assert our desire that that 58 project is completed first before there's any construction resumes then. And finally, it's my understanding, but I have not verified this, that if you recall when the bridge at Forks on 150 was closed for a length of time that superseded its contract date, it's my understanding that the contractor on 58 may be the same one, and that if so, there's a trend that they take on a number of jobs and put small crews on it, and potentially it's not concluded fast enough. In addition to that, those days that they can't work get added. on those things. And I understand that, I believe it was the first Friday or last Friday, they were not working there, and that day usually gets added on to the end of the contract. So again, I'm wondering if we can ask the MTO if that particular contract in any way, shape, or form can be expedited, and can they assure us that those closure dates have already built in a buffer such that it will be open. I mean, it is a major inconvenience right now, and I just don't think we should leave anything to chance, no stone unturned. So there was a few things there to unpack, Mr. Mayor. I don't know if you could look into them and get back to us before the next meeting.
Yeah, both the CAO and I will contact the ministry with regards to that. We'll work on that prior to the next meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's all I have.
Good, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Danch. Sorry, Councillor Danch, you already used your time, I think. Go ahead.
No, I have a short period of time left. Hey, I don't want to echo Gary's concerns, but any way we can get a hold of these region guys to maybe get some light synchronizing or a few more seconds added to some lights? Because, you know, guys, I'm on Main Street every day, okay? It's unbelievable. And, you know, you've got tractor trailer traffic that would normally be going in a totally different direction. And, you know, we haven't had no fender benders yet. That's a good thing, but I really think if we could get those region guys to get a few more seconds on Main Street and maybe an improved left-hand turn on Main and King might help everybody for a little bit. It's going to be a rough summer for all of us. Thank you.
Good, thank you. And I'll work with Mr. Kalamutu with that, with regards with our staff and the region on the lighting system. Some may have to be provincial, but the region looks after all of theirs and our lights. So we'll get a list of all those and approach the proper departments with that. Okay, Councillor? Good, thank you. Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Your Worship. Sorry for being a little late. I had some technical difficulties getting in. I have one main issue that's related to the beach ends, and I've had a few other ones, but they've been taken care of during the week by staff. The one that I have, I believe, would go straight to your worship. This one here is there's been some very serious incidences on Wildwood Road with regards to altercations between illegal park operators and residents of the area, and it's actually been witnessed by our bylaw staff where the residents have been threatened both verbally and physically, and they've been subjected to some very uncolorful verbal attacks by them. And there is some urgency to this, and with regards to putting whatever and doing whatever we can in order to protect and make the residents in the area feel safe again. It involves speeding, it involves the altercations with the people, it involves the parking, and this may have resulted from primarily the ability to park at certain areas on some of the fire lane, on some of the road end allowances, such as Wildwood and Pleasant Beach. So I'm asking in behalf of the residents on those roads if there could be whatever we can do to do it in order to protect them, in order to secure their and provide them a safe area, safe community to live in. So, Your Worship, whatever we can do, can you please assure them that we'll do whatever we can with regards to the having the police there as much as possible. They did file a report with this. The police were there. The police did come, but by the time the police got there, the people doing the threatening and that had left the location. So, Mayor Steele, I don't know what you can add or what we can do to this, but if you could look into it, it'd be great.
Thank you, Councillor. And the proper thing that they did do was contact Niagara Regional Police. So even though the people may have left, the police can still investigate this if there are threats made. Specifically, when you say and I did receive an email from one particular resident this afternoon with regards to that. So I will speak to our staff sergeant with regards to this. But again, they could be investigating this. This is something, obviously, they're not going to let us know right at this point. But with our staff being witness to it, I mean, it just helps the officers that did attend to take it any further if that was the wishes of the residents. So, but yeah, I mean, unfortunately, whether it be bylaws or police, you can't always be everywhere at once, but we can try to get them to get out there a little bit more often, I guess, than they already are. The lady did speak about the police coming down, and they actually went through her neighborhood with regards to safety with golf carts, which was a good, which she appreciated that the NRP gave them the rules and regs over the golf cart issue. But yeah, anytime somebody's coming into our town or lives here even and is going to be threatening in that manner, we do ask people, contact the police. If it's so threatening that you feel endangered, dial 911 and they'll get there as soon as they can. If it's a case of they're just yelling at them and they leave, you can still make a report, whether you call it in or make it online. You can do that with regards to that. But again, if somebody's threatening it, my first comment to anybody would be dial 911 if you feel threatened, because the quicker you dial 911, the faster they can get an officer there to help with the situation. So, I mean, that's something we don't want. So I'll approach the staff sergeant with this, with regards to that, and then we can take it from there. So I appreciate you bringing that forward, Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Your Worship. With this, the belief is that the parking is the main contributor to that type of an incident occurring. When people come in, they actually were parked in an access parking lot spot, and so they are looking at the aspect of whether that would be possible to remove that in order to stop people from parking down there. I know that we're doing the road studies and or we're doing the road allowance study, and I know that's in progress. Maybe through you to CAO Louis, if we knew the status of the road end allowance, where we are with that, and with regards to maybe the parking on the end of the roads. I don't know if Scott's got anything that he can add to that.
CAO?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Wells, I can provide a bit of an update. There is a existing contract, as Council is aware, for a planning company or a consulting firm to look at all of the road allowances that go down to the lake from Holloway Bay Road west to Reuter Road, and make recommendations to council on public access and what amenities are available, such as parking. We know that, with garbage, things that we don't currently provide, like security and so on. They were last at council April 26th. I think that the approach that they're taking, I asked for an update from the lead planner on the consulting job. He said that they don't have a date for council. They are taking a look at longer term solutions. This is not COVID related. This is absolutely a marathon, not a sprint. This is the permanent treatment, city treatment of the road ends, not the COVID treatment of the road ends. And I know sometimes it's easy to blur the two. Their next step is consultations with the business community. The BIA has asked to be involved through their chair, and the consultant was more than willing to allow that. A public information center, which may be hosted over Zoom if it's not possible to have that in person, and a draft report to City Council after taking those steps. And they're actively monitoring the situation this summer. So this information that Councillor Wells is bringing forward about altercations between recreational users and residential users absolutely can go into the study and the final recommendation that comes before council, because it's very troubling and it's the kind of thing that the city wants to avoid. through our we can create policy that, prevents these types of incidents from taking place, hopefully. So I can't provide a date, but we will get council, Sierra Planning back to council.
Okay, thank you, Mr. CAO. Councillor Walls?
Thank you. That addresses my issues.
Great, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Beauregard?
Thank you, Your Worship. In addition to what Councillor Danch was bringing up, they're talking about the regional roads and the timing of the lights. Can we have the region, also look at Mellenby Bridge? Because sometimes that gets really backed up because of the lights and their timing.
Yeah, I would include that also.
Okay.
On both sides of the bridge, how they operate with the advanced greens and how long they do operate. I was stuck in the middle of traffic the other day, and it's one thing I was speaking to my son that was with me, and they need the turn from once you get over the bridge towards our work center, that needs to go sooner and a little bit longer. Councillor Danch is right. They just need to be a little bit longer. So we'll take that to the region. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. And then the other thing I'd like to say is just you being on the police board. I'd like to say really thank you to the police for what they've been doing with the crackdown on the mufflers. I'm not sure if any charges have been laid in Port Colborne, but I was listening to the news this morning on my commute, and approximately 200 tickets have been laid on vehicles with loud mufflers or who contravene the any sort of noise or legislation that include those provisions. So I just want to say I'm happy that they're doing that, and look forward to when their blitz is completed and how much they have deterred the public from using these type of mufflers or not using mufflers at all.
Thank you, Councillor. It's called Operation Loud and Clear. In fact, I did get an update this morning. To date, the following 229 charges, as you mentioned, have been laid. 62 no mufflers, 50 improper mufflers, 75 unnecessary noise, and 42 other charges directly related to loud vehicles, including 3 suspended drivers and 3 vehicles being operated with no insurance. So they are doing this across Niagara, so this breakdown doesn't give each municipality, but I can ask if we can have that if you want. I can ask through the chief in his department if they can break it down. I can zip him an email for you, Councillor.
That would be great.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're finished? No further questions?
I'm done.
Great, thank you. Okay. Consideration of items requiring separate discussion. I'm going to have Councillors Bagu and Bodner move item 7.1, that the Chief Administrative Office Report 2021-187 be received for information. Mr. Louie, you and staff want to take it away, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I have 2 staff members with me, and we're going to present a slideshow. I think the clerk's department is going to run the slides. And I'll go first, and I'll allow Mr. Long, Gary Long, and Ms. Peterson, Alex Peterson, to follow me. And we'll take questions at the end if council would like. So I guess the council's aware that each department does an annual report to council. So you get, statistics and current events and work that's on the horizon and in progress and so on from each department. And it happens to be my turn today. Council is aware, and I think the first slide is the org chart here. Council is aware that I am the head of, I'm the senior non-elected person at the city. I'm the head of all of the department heads and the directors who oversee the different departments of the city, such as the fire department and corporate services and so on. But I also have a staff of my own, and that is the Strategic Initiatives Division. And you can see some of those folks here on the left-hand side of your screen. The Communications Division, and you can see them on the right-hand of the screen. And of course, my administrative assistant, and shared with the mayor, and she is the I guess, the brains behind the entire council operations too, provide services to councilors and help with, customer service, communication, conferences, just about anything that goes through City Hall for City Council members, and that's Nancy. My department, I'll push on to the next slide here. It's tough to provide an annual report because I don't, fill potholes or trim trees or put books on shelves. I can't display a product for council. CAOs, most cities in Ontario now are on the CAO system, which is one sort of head of staff. I use the analogy that I'm the principal and all the staff are the teachers. So hopefully that's an appropriate analogy. There is a statutory definition of a chief administrative officer. It comes from the Municipal Act, section 222, 229. I won't read it to you. There's also sort of the policy, procedure, administrative definition of what a CAO does. And it's really kind of stuffy, I think, for lack of a better term. It's not the day-to-day description, I don't think, of the job. It's more high level. I'll push on to the next slide here. So there's actually a well-known professor from Brock University, David Siegel, who talks about what a CAO really does. And there's a quote here from an essay that he wrote, and it talks about how the duties of the CAO do go beyond, though the previous slide, do go beyond the legal definitions and the role of giving advice to council or executing council's direction. And really what I do is I work with three distinct groups of people: all of the city staff, the entire community, which to me is visitors, businesses, residents, community groups, facility users like minor hockey or figure skating, Boy Scouts, anybody in the city. And of course, the other group is City Council, the 9 people who are the members of City Council. And City Council is an interesting one, and I think I've told the members of council this in the past, because we often refer to council as a group, but it really is 9 individuals. And sometimes 9 individuals don't agree. 8 people want something and 1 person doesn't, or 1 person wants something and 8 people don't. So that's why most of the direction we get comes from a city council meeting where there's a vote taken and the majority rules. And on to the next slide. So the first one is employee engagement, and I've got some, of course, that's been unique during the pandemic. I've included some pictures here of all of the meetings that we're having, so you can see we have senior management team, which the mayor joins from time to time, and minutes do go to the council members, so you know what we're working on. The top right-hand corner is our corporate leadership team. The bottom right-hand corner is just my division, and you can see Nancy's working there on a Zoom call with myself and Alex and Gary. And I'll push on to the next slide. So when it comes to employee engagement, and I know I've told this to council in the past, my sort of MO, if you will, is that an engaged workforce is going to provide great customer service, quality service, be very productive, and really deliver on the city's goals and objectives through that engagement. It's kind of the opposite of the old joke that the beatings will continue until morale improves. We're trying to have really good culture and really strong morale, and that is ideally going to impact positively on customer service and productivity. How do we do that? We do a lot of, we're trying to do more and more communication. We do employee engagement surveys, and we found out from our employee groups what they want to hear from us. We work with newsletters to staff. We have a monthly deckhands report, which is just a communication piece, an internal newsletter. We actually have a COVID email right now that goes out once a week to staff. We're doing more work with the communications department with videos for staff. I try to get out into the workplace. It's not always easy because a lot of workers work out in the field, and it hasn't been easy during COVID either because some workers are working from home, or we're trying to restrict the number of people in the workplace. But the concept of management by walking around is something that we practice too. So I will drop into the fire hall or drop into the operations center or just walk the 3 floors of City Hall and check in with staff. One of the things that we're trying to do as in terms of improving employee engagement, especially during the pandemic, but not specific to the pandemic, is celebrating our successes, celebrating a job well done, an accomplishment, which could be a moment in time or a weekend like Canal Days, or a project that we finished on time and or on budget. So that recognition in the bottom right-hand corner you see here, we're doing more and more contests among staff. We're doing little pick-me-ups along the way, sometimes a handwritten note, sometimes a shout out at a council meeting. And then of course, the mayor already mentioned today, it's hard to do during COVID, but some of the retirements that we've had, we recognize our staff as they finish their careers. More and more work around work anniversaries or work anniversaries, where we recognize people for their years of service. And we're doing a few sort of morale building events around, around staff during the pandemic, trying to do more, a coffee mug or a little ticket. Sometimes we work with a vendor in town to get a free coffee or a free donut for staff, and we can have a little lunch even though we can't gather for lunch during the pandemic. And the next slide. So a few things that are coming up in the world of employee engagement. I am working with communications on an internal communication strategy, and I can't take very much of the credit. It's almost all done by Alex, who is our communications officer. We are working on a staff intranet. This is one-stop shopping for staff to look up policies, to talk to each other, to fill out forms, human resources type issues. It's going to get staff like basically one way of communicating with each other, and we're very much looking forward to that. Online recognition portal, a way again that we can celebrate our successes. And the last thing is job shadowing, a little way to break down silos between departments and silos between workers, and kind of a way to have one hand know what the other hand is doing. So a chance for, to use an example, someone in the fire department to know what goes on in the planning department, or someone in the planning department to know what goes on in engineering. And that helps with communication and understanding one another's life at work. And next slide. Community engagement. So one of the things that I've been doing is encouraging volunteerism among staff. I encourage folks to sit on boards. I myself sit on some boards in Port Colborne, like I attend the Chamber of Commerce as a non-voting member on behalf of council. I myself like to maintain my presence in the community, make sure that I shop local and drop in on stores and check in on different components of the community. Staff, leaders and managers in the organization, and even myself, interact with the stakeholder groups like the BIA, as mentioned earlier today, Niagara Industrial Association, the Chamber of Commerce that serves Port Colborne and Wainfleet. I've been appearing on radio and 610 Talk Radio with a roundtable in the past. We're doing interviews, CH News when they come into town to film, or promotional events with CH News, promotional events around Canal Days, and even radio commercials for Canal Days. Yeah, if people have heard on Giant and Country 89, you've heard my ahoy. I'm famous for my ahoy. And sometimes I get out there with the mayor and record commercials, and so you'll hear the mayor or you'll hear myself. And in the future, bottom right-hand corner, still to come, public engagement has a very big place in the strategic plan that was approved last month by council. And I think you're going to see a lot more engagement between City Hall, city staff, the CAO himself, and the community. And next slide. And of course, lastly, we talked about council. It's more and more important during the pandemic that council knows what the city is up to. I mean, even some of the questions today during the council meeting show that maybe council's not hearing everything that's going on in city departments. I do a weekly email to council on COVID specifically. From time to time, when something important happens between council meetings, we do update council via email. For example, if there's an accident or a fire in the community that's of a severe, not every fire, but of a severe nature, I would give council a heads up before they would read about it in the newspaper. But the main way we communicate through council as a group is through staff reports, and that is through open sessions, or where it's permitted or required, closed sessions or in-camera meetings of council. And as council is aware, and COVID has complicated this, I would like to have one-on-one meetings with council. And I use the term one-on-one loosely because it's my preference to meet with 2 ward councillors at a time. And it's my preference to include some of the other leaders at the city so that you have a chance in groups of 2 to hear from the finance department or to hear from the public works department, so you know when a project is taking place in your ward as a council member. And lastly, on the far right of the screen, you know that we have are obviously operating in a virtual environment. I will leave it up to the clerk to provide updates on how long that's expected to last, but I've been consulting with CAOs all over Niagara, and it seems that there is not a rush to return to in-person council meetings. We're looking at least the fall past Labor Day for City Hall being wide open. We are open to the public for services on an appointment basis. We will eventually have the doors wide open. You can walk up to them and pull them and walk in. You will have to do a COVID screening. That will still exist. And we're trying to plan council meetings to return around the same time that happens. And next slide. So this slide, I just wanted to talk about keeping things going during the pandemic. Virtual meetings of council, I just talked about. Subcommittees of council. There is, for example, the library board meets virtually. All of our staff meetings have been virtual. Any kind of meeting with more than 2 or 3 people has gone to Microsoft Teams or Zoom, which we use for council meetings. And it's been a good way of keeping people engaged. I think a lot of people are anxious to get back to face-to-face, but I think the virtual is it will be here to stay in some way, shape, or form. We've tried creative initiatives to maintain internal engagement. We, for example, just last Thursday had a town hall meeting, a virtual town hall, where staff were able to check in on Microsoft Teams and attend an organization-wide meeting. Of course, everyone can attend at the same time because some services are essential and workers have to maintain them, but we do record those meetings and provide them for staff to watch after the fact. And then the last one, community engagement through social media. So I think we're going to have some information coming up from Alex about this, but we've done contests over social media. We've tried to maintain our touch points, virtual celebrations and open houses. I know the Lockview Park, for example, was a virtual open house. We've done other ones. And in the future, we're, as I've already mentioned, returning to opening city facilities. Hopefully, as the roadmap rolls out in terms of steps, you'll see recreation facilities like the arena open, in-person meetings, and possibly in the future, even though they're not made necessary by the pandemic, but just because it is an easy way to get people into the same room, the virtual tools will stay in place in some instances. I'll go to my last slide, which is a bit of a statistical overview. This is sort of how my life goes on the day-to-day or week to week. We check in with our entire senior management team once a month, our corporate leadership team a little bit more often than that. We have a media communications review each Monday morning, a kickoff to the week with communications and myself and the mayor. Since the pandemic started, working left to right here, we've had 82 meetings of the Emergency Control Group. The Emergency Operations Center was activated, I think it was March 15th or 13th, and there's been 82 meetings since that day. As council is aware, we have the grant program, and there's our statistics on our grants working on the bottom row, right to left. I still meet with my directors one-on-one to plan out a year's worth of goals and objectives and to see and to track progress. And we continue to have our quarterly town hall meetings and other liaising with outside partners. And one of the things that I will say, like, all of the staff have done a great job during the pandemic. It's been very demanding on staff. I think I've mentioned this before. There's sort of some staff that have not seen a change in the type of work they do or in the workload, and they've just been able to keep on trucking. Some staff have had their life completely changed. All of their work is COVID related now. If you look at parks and bylaw and so on, they've had incredible demands on them, and they've been able to rise to the challenge of the impacts of COVID. Parks in particular, there was a period of time last year where beach, marina, farmers market, arena, sports fields, playground equipment, spray pad, everything was on their plate. And it was difficult to please everyone. There was so much going on at once. And as soon as you got the lights flipped on in one facility, the next facility was demanding attention from parks. So they did a great job and rose to the challenge. And of course, there's people who've had their workload, the third group, they've had to keep all of the fires burning and deal with the impacts of COVID. For example, the planning department, building department, and I guess I would say parks falls into that too. So on that basis, I will turn it over to Gary Long for economic development. And if there's questions, I'll take them at the end, Mr. Mayor.
Great, thank you, CAO. Mr. Long?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, Council. The Economic Development and Tourism Services Division is a new division that was established last fall under the direction of CAO Louis. And I just wanted to thank and recognize the members of the Economic Development and Tourism Services team for their hard work. We have a lot on the go, but we're having fun. And we appreciate the support we've received from Council. And it continues to be an honor and a privilege for us to serve Council and the community. Next slide, please. So in terms of, I guess, areas of responsibility, obviously our main sort of area of focus is economic development and tourism, but we're also focused on special projects, strategic initiatives, government relations, events, volunteers, and other public programs and services, including crossing guards and cemetery services. We're focused on a lot of things, but I would say that our group is spending a lot of time on two areas of business. One is we are really committed to increasing our service levels to businesses, investors, and developers, and really helping them navigate through City Hall by providing what I would say is an expedited and a streamlined review process of their inquiries. I think the other thing that we spend a lot of time on is making sure that we're adding value throughout the organization, working collaboratively with city staff on any and all projects and priorities. We have established some cross-divisional project teams to essentially solve issues and capitalize on opportunities. And we're always happy to get involved and participate on other committees and other teams throughout the organization. Next slide, please. So here is a list of just some of the projects and priorities that our division is working on. It's not a complete list, but it does highlight some of our top projects and priorities. And I'd be happy to take any questions that you have in this presentation. Thank you very much.
Oh, we lost you, Gary.
Oh, yeah, I'm finished. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. CAO?
I believe it is my turn. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. I am here to provide a quick update regarding the communications department. So the communications department, a little bit of background, we are still relatively a new department. We were established in 2018. And our objective is to provide strategic communications and marketing support to all city departments, including the mayor's office. Prior to 2018, all communications and marketing initiatives were done within specific departments, And one of the main reasons why this became a standalone department was to ensure that we're able to streamline marketing efforts to stay consistent with messaging, branding, and strategic priorities. I've listed below some high-level portfolios that we provide support with, including media relations, writing media releases, public notices, quotes, engaging with the media to set up various events, our website, including making updates, making sure that we are consistent with brand standards, AODA compliance, community engagement. We also provide support for internal communications. We've been working closely with the human resources team to make sure that our staff are aware of operational changes and things that we are participating within the community. We are also responsible for COVID communications. That's been a challenge, as you're all aware, this past year and a half. We're also responsible for social media. So right now we manage Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook for the city. We are also the emergency information officer, so we work closely with fire and emergency services as well as public works to make sure that we're being efficient and speedy when it comes to announcing different operational changes or different emergencies within the community. We also do our City Hall news, our external newsletter, and of course, our brand standards. I just wanted to provide some high-level statistics to let you know kind of the scope in which we're working with. So these statistics are from May 1st, 2020 to May 1st, 2021. So in that time period, we were mentioned 419 times within local newspapers. We released 49 media releases, 33 public notices. We had more than 500,000 website visits. Within that time period, we also communicated more than 1,800 times in individual posts on social media. Once again, that's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. A number that I'm quite impressed with and proud of is that we had more than 7 million reach and impressions. And so that's how many times our messages have reached through Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, various individuals, so our community, but it also expands outside of our community. We also had more than 13,000 social media comments. In comparison, I did ask Jonathan, our customer service manager, to pull the number of calls that City Hall received within that time period. And they responded, I believe they had just over 20,000 calls. So I added that number just to show the way that our world is changing and how people are preferring to communicate with City Hall. And then as well, as we all know, COVID allowed us to be a little bit more creative in how we engaged with our community. So we did a lot of videos and virtual engagements, and we had more than 114,000 video views. I just wanted to highlight some of our successes this year. So as you're all aware, we launched our new corporate branding. So that is a slow multi-year project, multi-phase year project that we're working closely with customer service and Gary Long's team. We launched our new website that went live in December 2020. I'm also happy to say that we won a platinum award for that. We have increased our email subscribers by 30% since December 2020, working closely with the customer service team. We're trying to find different ways to encourage residents to subscribe to our email newsletter so they can stay up to date. Slow process, but we definitely are getting there. I also wanted to touch base on COVID-19 pandemic communications. I see this as a success because it allowed us to strengthen relationships with partners and stakeholders within the communications portfolio. So we meet with all communications staff across Niagara. So all municipalities get together bi-weekly in order to stay up to date, and allows us to collaborate. Also, another success is that we have started to streamline communications efforts with our customer service team. We meet weekly to make sure that my team, as well as Jonathan Wright's team, is in the know and able to provide that high-level quality customer service that our residents and visitors are expecting. And then last but not least, a success is that we also added an additional full-time communications officer. So when Michelle returns from maternity leave, there will be 2 of us on staff full-time, which is exciting because as you saw in the previous slide, our work is expanding and we're working more strategically and collaboratively with the other departments. The next slide, I really hope the sound works. It is a video that our communications coordinator, Cheyenne, created. It put together some reasons why it's important to keep digital communications in mind, especially when it comes to video editing. And it's just a way that we've had fun engaging with our residents and visitors, but also providing important information. So just a quick video and hopefully the sound works. If not, I'll share the link afterwards.
Swing out, jive in. Come on, honey, show me how you move it. Swing out, jive in. 1, 2, 3 to the groove. Come and dance with me. Swing out, jive in. The party don't stop till we drop. Come on now. Swing out, jive in. Yeah. Swing out, jive in. Come on, honey, show me how you move it. Swing out, jive in. 1, 2, 3 to the groove. Come and dance with me. Swing out, jive in. The party don't stop till we drop. Come on now. Swing out, jive in. Yeah. Come on, honey, show me how you move it.
Ahoy! Welcome aboard. Ahoy!
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 So a quick little video, and videos are also a great way that we're able to connect with various departments. So we work closely with the library and the museum. For example, the virtual top hat ceremony, we worked closely with the museum this year to make sure that we were still providing that level of service to our customers, even though it wasn't in person. And then my final slide is just I wanted to emphasize some of the 2021-2022 goals for the communications department. So as Scott mentioned, we are working on an internal strategy closely with human resources and customer service. We're also working closely with various departments to continue to update our branding. This includes signage, business cards, and making sure that everything is AODA compliant. Social media strategy as we continue to explore this digital and virtual world that we live in, just making sure that we are staying up to date on the latest technology so we can once again provide that level of service to our residents. Media relations training, I am working on an internal training module to provide to senior leadership as well as council if they are interested. And then department structure. As we grow and we decide where we're going as a municipality, communications is obviously there to support all of the teams. And so we're looking to expand and work closely in the government relations sphere as well as economic development initiatives. And that's the end.
Great, Alex, thank you. And Gary and CAO, Mr. Louie, any final comments before questions?
No, I just wanted to, through your worship, thank Alex and Gary for the work they did in the presentation, and Nancy, who is on vacation this week and didn't have to attend the call. She's a very important part of the team, as I know the council members are aware, and we're more than willing. I know you have a busy night ahead of you, but if there are any questions, we're more than willing to answer them.
Great, thank you. Any questions? Okay, you did a great job. Thumbs up, I see out there from counselors. Good job. So, no questions. All in favor, please raise your hand. That's to receive. That's carried. Thank you, CAO department. Item 7.2. I'll have Councilors Bagu and Bruno move that Corporate Services Department Report 2021-77 be received for information. We do have Mr. Bowles on the line. I'll go to Councilor Bagu for questions first.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I know there was a question for Director Bowles regarding the water bill, so I'll leave that till later on. I have a question regarding that. You could probably answer that later. The one thing I like is the excellent report. Thank you very much, Director Bowles. But there's one thing I'd like to see here. I might be a little touchy in some of the confidential stuff the city does, but through direction of council, I would like to see our legal fees also posted on our expenses quarterly or however you do this, these financial reports through you, Mr. Mayor. Is that quite possible?
Mr. Bowles?
Through the mayor to council, it's a lengthy report, and to be fair, it's still a work in progress. But it's actually buried in the report, and I could pull it out maybe quickly for you. The legal costs, so that way they can be identified. But we can certainly highlight them for council on a go forward basis. I'm just looking here. I think it's in the first appendix. Legal costs to date are $54,000.
Counselor?
Okay, Mr. Mayor. I just appreciate having it in the reports. That's all.
Great.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm good.
Thank you. Counselor Bruno?
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Brian. Excellent report. I just had 2 points about the report, maybe more for, we had a conversation today, but just to highlight one. When one looks at the summary in A1 and you're doing trimester reporting, and then you're showing the budget for the year and the variance, there's certainly when you're dealing with the first trimester, against the overall budget. I mean, the variance is important, but it's so far off being to like the end of the second trimester, where the variance is really showing where you're projected maybe to land at the end of the year. So I'm just wondering, in the future, in the trimester, would you be able to do a variance to budget to date? Or is that too much of a complication? I realize still that there will be anomalies, like, we're doing really well in public works, but the winter hasn't come yet, or an example like that. But those are explainable anomalies. So I'm just wondering if, because we really, when we see things, we're 2 months in a rearview mirror on a trimester. And again, the variance against the end of the year, it's a lot more difficult to judge if you're not an insider to those numbers.
Director Bowles?
Through the mayor to council, I think it's a good point. In trimester 2, we'll introduce forecasting, and that forecasting will be available in future trimester 1s as well. So that way council will have the opportunity to see, I guess, the insiders, the director's viewpoint of what the future looks like. As council's aware, we've been readjusting our account structure, and that goes live this week. It will make these reports a lot easier for us to do going forward. But we can certainly adjust it, and we could even, prorate the budget potentially and show like a 4-month versus a 4-month. I would have to, I guess, caution council to identify that in doing so, sometimes costs aren't exactly rateable. So we have to put some thought into that. A good example would be the beach. When you look at the beach, there's almost no cost for the first 4 months because we didn't have too many takers in March and April, but certainly as May and June, that changed. So we could this report will definitely evolve, and we definitely will add commentary going forward as well. I guess for council to think of this as a placeholder that we are making improvement, and we're getting to that. I think that financial report that you're looking for on a regular basis to be able to continue to review the finances at the level that you want for a governance perspective.
Councilor Bruno?
Thank you. And one more on the capital related projects. It's a very interesting document for councilors when you look at it to see, and and you know, we've had this discussion before around the council table about capital budgets allotted and not spent, and in some cases they're spent, you know, into the next year, and we're approving the next year's capital works, and a lot hasn't happened. But I find it a constructive visual to look at the capital budget approved, the spend along the way, and where it is to the year end. Same issues, that it can be dangerous on a project that isn't going to start till September, and you know, you look at the second trimester and you still haven't spent any of it, and you say, is this thing ever going to happen? But those are the kind of questions, not for tonight, but that would be relevant if we could see that more often. And again, it doesn't have to come to a council meeting, but if we had access to it, we could be asking those questions about our pet project or a project along the way. And again, you know, in June, it's looking at end of April. So I noticed some of those projects, you know, Clarence Street sidewalk, right? Well, I'm sure it's just that it hasn't been posted yet. But the budget and the doing is over, and perhaps even paid for or drawn along the way. But by April 30th, it wasn't. But I like it as a visual to click on projects. And actually there were two that I want to bring up to you at a later date, but they're really about sort of inside City Hall projects that could best be done while it's closed and yet doesn't appear to be started, but that's for another time. So I don't know if that particular in-flight capital related project chart could be something we could see more often than these trimester reports, or if it can be a living document.
Mr. Bowles?
Through the mayor to council, I look to, I guess, the CAO and also the director of public works, but technically we can definitely create anything that council wants from a financial perspective. And then the mechanism to submit it to council, I can work through the CAO on how to do that. But certainly for council, if you'd like to see information more frequently, like the capital report, we can work on that mechanism. The second point, just to identify to council, and I appreciate kind of the patience as we've created these financial reports, is, and I think the councilor hit on it, sometimes reviewing a financial report just as a standalone number doesn't tell the whole story. Because sometimes there's a lot of work that's gone on to start a project. We just haven't received an invoice. Right now, we identified in the report that we don't practice commitment accounting, i.e. we may have awarded a contract and that work may be starting in the next month, but you don't necessarily see that when we just look at spend to actual or spend to budget. So definitely we can, I'll work with the CAO and the Director of Public Works to see how we can send a capital report out more frequently to council.
Councillor?
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's all I have.
Thank you. Councillor Wells?
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Bruno had covered my area. I was going to ask Director Bowles if he had any feeling toward the spend for capital, and that was answered during his response to Councillor Bruno. Thank you.
Gary took your notes again, I see. Anyways, no further questions, council? Okay, all in favor, please raise your hand. That's carried. Item 7.3, all of Councillors Wells and Bagu move that Public Works Department Report 2021-180 be received for information. I'll go to Councillor Wells for questions.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've presented some questions to the various parties that were involved with this report. One of them was there's a significant impact in regards to our performance, or what we perceive as our performance, due to the weather impacts that is completely out of our control, as well as how the province handles some of the factors that are involved in calculating the energies consumed or the greenhouse gas emission contributions. One of those things was I raised the question, and maybe Darlene could go to Darlene on this one, that she could explain it a little bit more. And that is to normalize the report, or to take into consideration these weather factors or factors that are out of our control, so that we can compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges from one year to the next, to see that we're attaining our goals that we have set in our plans. Darlene, I know you and I had talked about this. Maybe you can explain how these are important factors that have to be taken into consideration when we look or try to understand how much we've done in a year to achieve our goals.
Ms. Sutter?
Thank you, Councillor Wells, through you, Mr. Mayor. We definitely, weather does play a big impact with our emissions and how they vary from year to year. Of course, if we have a really cold year versus a very hot year, we're going to use more natural gas to heat or more electricity to cool. And the conversation I had with Councillor Wells earlier today, it definitely is difficult to compare year to year when we can't take weather into consideration. Currently, when we perform energy audits of our facilities, we do take the weather into consideration on a facility by facility basis. And one of the things I discussed with Councillor Wells is we have tried graphing that with the entire city, with all the facilities we report on, but the graph did not give us very good information. So we, in discussions with our climate change coordinator, Ms. Lannon, who is on the call as well, we are thinking that we could, in moving forward, look at the information we gather from specific facilities, and then we remove the weather out of that equation by removing the electricity that we say is to be used for cooling and the natural gas for heating, that we could perhaps see how that, compare that from year to year. The report presented today, important to note, is basically to fulfill a regulatory requirement under the broader public sector reporting through the ministry. So it's not as fulsome and as comparable year to year, that we can actually see some really good trends. And that is definitely something moving forward that we want to do now that we have a climate change coordinator position.
Councillor Wells?
Thank you. Darlene was very good in responding to my questions earlier today, so they're all answered, and that was the only one I wanted to make sure everybody understood about the impact that we are making progress. Unfortunately, there are certain things out of our control that taint the picture a little bit different than we would actually want it.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bagu.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I don't really know who this question goes to, but the regulatory report I know has to come to council every year, but expanding your scope, like basically what I also want to hear as a councillor is recommendations. Do we get electric vehicles? Do we get charging stations in the city? Does the mayor get an electric vehicle instead of a big fat black pickup truck, or things like that? And I know we're planting a lot of trees. You work with the environmental committee very well, but coming up to budget time, if I want to see an electric vehicle in the city, it's hard for me to justify that to my fellow councilors if I don't really know, your environmental initiatives, and climate change initiatives that I can grab a hold of and convince I don't think I have to convince my councilors about climate change, but that's what I'm looking for, Mr. Mayor, anyway. So with budget coming up, I really like to see some initiatives the city can take. I know it costs a little bit more, electric vehicles and stuff, but the world has changed. Port Colborne, we're way behind, Mr. Mayor, and I know we're going to have to start very soon. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And just to clarify a comment you made, my big black pickup truck I own. It's not owned by the city. The city does not provide me with a vehicle. I just want to make that clear, Councillor.
Oh yeah, that might hit the press there.
So the city doesn't buy me electric vehicles.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
Just want to make sure that's clarified out there. Ms. Sutter, do you want to answer that question from the councillor?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bagu. That is actually another discussion that myself and May and our new environmental compliance supervisor, Cassandra Banting, who is on the call today, we had a discussion about that, and definitely moving forward, I think what the three of us discussed today is that we will ensure that the annual report isn't just a report on what the legal requirements are, but also how we're progressing with our greenhouse gas emissions internally and with the inventory. Because as you're well aware, Ms. Lannon did a inventory last year that was presented to council along with the greenhouse gas emissions reduction plan that council approved in February of 2020. So that's definitely something we're going to amalgamate moving forward. And as far as recommendations go, I know we've had discussions with Director Kalimutu about setting more goals for specifically the facilities, but definitely we could look at fleet moving into the next year. That is when we get some new positions in place and working together and getting some actual targets and things that we can do to help reduce emissions and bring recommendations to council.
Great, thank you. Councillor Bagu?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Do we think we could have something coming up for our next budget experience, I guess you'd call it, with Director Bowles?
Ms. Sutter?
We can have a look. Ms. Banty, Ms. Landon, and myself can have a look and see what we have on our agendas, and also work with our facilities supervisor and potentially when we get our our fleet supervisor in place. I can't make any promises for lots this year, but we'll do our best to have something on the roll.
Great, thank you. Councillor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We can start small, it doesn't matter. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Great, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bruno?
Thank you, Worship. I guess turnabout is fair play. I think Councillor Baggio was looking over my shoulder. He's got a camera here in my office looking at that question, because that's the one I had, which was all things climate besides just the regulatory one. And it was around electric vehicles and the next budget and all that. And I discussed that with May today. So even if it's just the infrastructure or some, I guess, symbolism, green car parking spot at City Hall gets moved closer, that doesn't cost any money, but I would like to see those things. On the report, the only other question I had, and I thought it might be for the edification of council tonight and going forward, is in May's report on page 405, it talks about, is it anticipated that future reports should show reductions in energy intensity paralleled by the increase in efficiencies, et cetera, in the current and future implementation. So the next 2020 report is going to have a whole bunch of COVID smeared all over the usage and efficiency in our buildings. And I'm just wondering how that will, how it will work itself out in a comparator.
Ms. Sutter, do you want to take that, or do you want Ms. Lannon to take that?
I was going to pass over to Ms. Lannon, please.
Great, thank you. Ms. Lannon?
Thank you. Through the mayor to Councillor Bruno. So in regard to the years 2020 and probably most of 2021, our energy data for our facilities is going to be a little out of sorts and is going to probably show reductions that we didn't earn. So I know the broader public sector, each year they do an educational webinar before we do the report. And a lot of the questions that we had for them this year was, how do we account for 2020 so that it's not just a write-off of a year, and so we can actually use that data. So it may be one of those things where we can't look at it as a whole in energy intensity as we have, but maybe the regressions that Councillor Wells suggested might be useful, because then it's easier to break down your HVAC, your plug load, and your lighting, and we can do smaller analysis with that data for the next coming years.
Great, thank you.
Thank you to all three of you. It's a great report. That's it for me, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Claylough?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just to reassure our two councillors that brought up the question regarding electric cars, I see the smile on Mrs. Sutter's face. I did bring this up. I sit on that council, or on that committee, And we did talk about it last year, and I forwarded some reports regarding it. Everything was in the very early stages as to what was available and how it could be done. And I know we did talk about it prior to COVID. We did touch on it many times. Things just weren't possible at that point, but we've moved so far so quickly that Diane, they do know how much, and Miss Lannon as well, how much I'm in favor of all of this. And I think that it's the way of the future, and we have talked about it, and I'm hoping with the next year we will be able to move forward in that direction. But be assured that it wasn't, something that we didn't talk about and think about. It just wasn't something at that particular moment of time that we could move forward with. But Mrs. Sutter did look at it, and we, like I said, well aware of it and looking at the information, and hopefully it'll be something that we do move forward with very quickly to the satisfaction of everyone, the community and council, everyone at large, and the environment. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor. Any further questions? Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. That's carried. Item 7.4, I'll have Councillor Wells and Councillor Danch move that the Corporate Services Department Report 2021-174 be received, and that the timeline proposed in Appendix A of Corporate Services Department Report 2021-174 be approved. Councillor Wells?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Director Bowles, I know we've shared some communications on this today, but if you could just re-emphasize the fact that although we have a timeline in front of us, if extra time is required, or if time is required for us to dig into budget items, that additional time will be allotted to that. Can you just give us a little bit of a feel for the flexibility of that timeline? Director Bowles?
Yes, through the mayor to council. I think the timeline is really identifying dates that we can start the process. If council would like to have additional dates, they can be added. Potentially, and I'd let the clerk decide, but potentially we could take over, or we could have some commentary at a council meeting as well. So we can certainly add dates should they be needed. We've tried to set up a schedule that will allow us to hand out the budget documents 2 weeks in advance. And I can say now that we've kind of had a year through the budget process, we are moving, I guess, a little more advanced in our time frame. Staff will be submitting first rounds of thoughts for 2022 in July. So we do expect to be able to hit the timelines, but if council would require additional time for deliberation, questions back of staff, we can certainly adjust them. There is no hard date to have this done by the end of the year. This is just a mechanism to show council a direction that could make that happen should they wish.
Thank you. Councillor Wells?
Thank you, Director Bowles. That answered my question.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Clayloff?
My apologies, I didn't take my hand down.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Any further questions, council? Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. That's approved. Item 7.5, recommendation that Chief Administrative Office Report 2021-162 be received. The council approved the Brownfield Community Improvement Plan, Downtown Central Business District Community Improvement Plan agreement between the City of Port Colborne and Southport Condos Inc., attached as Appendix A to Chief Administrative Office Report 2021-162, and that a bylaw to enter into an agreement with Southport Condos Inc. be brought forward. All of Councillors Wells and Bagu move this, and I'll go to Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Your Worship. When we look at these grants that similar to this, ones that involve items of environmental issues, I was just would like to ask, I think it would go through you to Gary Long, in regards to looking at, a lot of this is related to the environmental contamination of that area and the cleanup of that. Have we looked at that contamination to really evaluate the cost associated to that cleanup? And if so, what would the cost look like if there were no contaminations? Are we covering, are we allowing for grant entities to include things that would be there normally, such as landscaping, for example?
Mr. Long?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillors. So regarding the contamination, the owner of the property has had phase 1 and phase 2 environmental assessment completed. And it showed, in terms of contamination, there's boron, there's metals, petroleum, hydrocarbons, volatile organic compound. All of these contaminants have been completely removed from the site. And approximately 3,000 cubic meters of soil was taken to a local landfill as part of the cleanup of the site. Hope that answers the councillor's question.
Councillor Wells?
It tells me what has happened. It tells me that 3,000 cubic meters of soil were taken away, but those 3,000 cubic meters of soil may not have all been contaminated. They may have been not of a standard to support the construction, or they may have needed to be removed from that just for the sole purpose of allowing for the construction. I'll give you an example. In regards to Schedule C, page 13, the only environmental costs that are associated there are roughly $705,000 worth identified as truly environmental costs, when the total bill there is $2.3 million. So not a concern, but my curiosity is that if there is only $700,000 truly related to an environmental issue, then the other $1.3 million would have been normally incurred in the construction of those condos. So I'm just, again, just curious as how we arrive at that total allowance for these grants and tax evasions.
Mr. Long?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillors. So I guess regarding the costing, if there was no contamination on the site, the property owner would not have had to complete over $900,000 of work identified in Schedule C. Remaining 1.3 million is more to do with demolition of buildings on the site, and the upgrading of both on and off on-site servicing for the project.
Councillor Wells?
Okay, I have one other question. I believe it was last year that we approved a TIG grant of $2.5 million. Is that included in this one, or is that one being replaced by the one that's proposed in this one here? I'm just wondering where and how that fits in, whether the 2021 TIG of $2.517 million, is that on top of the one that we approved in 2020?
Mr. Long?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. Yes, the councillor is right. Last May, council did approve in principle the request from the property owner to realize the benefits of our CIP programs. The main purpose of the staff report tonight is to include the CIP agreement. So the 2.5 last year has not changed. It's not in addition to what council approved last year. Tonight is really about formalizing the terms of the agreement and moving forward with council support. So it sort of formalizes and legalizes the full terms of the CIP that's being provided to the property owner.
Thank you. Councillor Wells?
So in results to that, Gary, the total that we're, the total tax relief that we're extending towards Southport condos is then the $4.8 million range?
Mr. Long?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is correct.
Councillor?
That's it. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councillor Bagu?
I'm good with the report, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed? That's carried. Thank you, Council. Item 7.6. I'll have Councillor Wells and Councillor Kalaloff move that Corporate Services Department Report 2021-183, the 2021 Beach Operations Update, be received as information. Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Worship. Through you to Director Bowles. The report is very good from the perspective of it identifies that everything seems to be working well at the beaches. But I was just wondering if the report, because it doesn't actually identify any issues that have resulted, I was just wondering if there were any issues, and if so, what we might do to improve, even though things are going well. Is there anything that we can do to improve the situation if those things could be included in the report?
Director Bowles?
Through the mayor to council, we can certainly add additional to the report going forward. One area that we did have some trouble with was just aligning the technology and the staff training for the Port Colborne residents data that we had at Cedar Bay for the first 3 weeks. That has been rectified, and something that we may not have highlighted too much here, but we did have, I think it was spoken to at a previous council meeting, we did have a situation where we had a number of students. It was a student day, I guess, at the beach, and that did I think test us a little bit. And some things that we did do to adjust that is we did add additional security at Cedar Bay on a go forward basis, because we found that some students found a way to get dropped off, and that kind of increased the numbers on the beach. So now we have a mechanism to be able to increase security when needed to help with situations like that where people may congregate quickly.
Thank you. Councillor Wells?
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councillor Bagu?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have to apologize. This question may or may not, it's going to fit in, but I got to go in a roundabout way for the safe operation of the beach. I heard this morning on CHDH that Humberston Centennial Beach was the health department, Niagara Health Department was over the limits. Then I looked down the Niagara Regional Health this afternoon. It also included Nickel Beach. It says for more information, contact your city. So I went on our city's website, and there's nothing in there whatsoever about our beaches being, the water being unsafe for the residents. And I'm wondering if somebody's making a reservation to use the beach in 2 days, you know, they're going to show up and then they're going to find out it's not safe to swim in our water. So I just wondered, Mr. Mayor, if we could somehow post that on our website. I know we don't like posting bad news, but we got to be truthful and open for all the residents and non-residents coming to our city, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Bowles, can you answer that question?
Yeah, so through yourself, Mayor, to Council, there is a mechanism, and I can check again, where we connect right to the region's website, where they update that regularly. So that way, when they update, ours updates, and that is what other cities have moved to over a period of time. And at the beaches themselves, we do have signage that does remind people to check the safety of the water. We don't have a mechanism to where we say if you show up and you don't want to swim, that we do the refund mechanism. Somebody could certainly cancel their pre-order or their ticket in advance, and we would accommodate that. But we don't necessarily close the beach just because the beach isn't safe for swimming. Lots of people go to the beach not necessarily to swim, but to sit on the sand, build sandcastles with their family, have lunch, etc. So the beaches remain open, but we do have mechanisms that link into the region's website. And we've done that historically for efficiency purposes because they can change that pretty quickly. And sometimes they change it at odd times that aren't necessarily conducive to maybe getting our communications team or that to be able to update our website. So by linking directly to the region's website, we've done that. But we'll take another look to see if there is a way that we can highlight that better, because if you looked and didn't see it, that means we need to do better.
Thank you, Mr. Bowles. Councillor Bagu?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm good.
Thank you. No further questions. All in favor, please raise your hand. That's carried. I'll have Councillor Bagu and Councillor Desmarais move that Corporate Services Department Report 2021-177 be received. That Council approve the City of Port Colborne joining the Joint Accessibility Advisory Committee, and that the Manager of Human Resources be delegated to select 2 city appointees to sit as members of the Joint Accessibility Advisory Committee for 2021-2022. Councillor Bagu.
Thanks again, Mr. Mayor. I think I'm taking away from Councillor Bruno here. He must have better judges tonight. Anyways, Mr. Mayor, I'm a little leery on this proposition, the Joint Accessory Advisory Committee. I like our committees to be local. We have local issues in Port Colborne. I know Councillor Wagner's on this committee. I would love to hear from him. But I just feel by sending it off to West Lincoln and wherever else, we're going to lose our local issues also. And my other problem is committee appointments have always been done pretty well by council. And this one recommendations making HR will making the recommendations and not council. So I'm not in favor of that, Mr. Mayor. So that's all I got to say to that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Great, thank you. Our clerk has a comment on this. Madam Clerk?
Through the chair, thank you. I just want to assure you that this is a joint committee. So every member is an equal member, and every member has an equal sitting at the table, and everyone's voices get heard. It's really about bringing knowledge to the group as a whole, because every one of these municipalities is maybe too small to have the resources in-house, but sees the benefit and the need for it.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Councillor Bodner, do you have any comments?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I had feelings somewhat like that to start with, that it would be diluted or we'd get lost in the, everybody else's problems. And I still have that a little bit, but I'm willing to give this a go on for lack of a better word, a trial basis. And I'd ask the clerk to correct me or whoever else is in charge of this, that if we found that this wasn't working, can we pull out and kind of do our own thing again?
I'm going to go to Ms. Murray on this one.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, we right now would sign a contract for the remainder of this year, and then we could choose to leave and go back to our sort of own committee next year.
Okay.
Councilor Potter?
Yes, thank you. So there is an advantage in having a professional person on this committee that can help the members make decisions and run things by them. We had suffered a little bit on the committee of not having a staff member that was, you know, absolutely proficient in all the aspects of the accessibility. So from that aspect, it could be good, but I share Councillor Baguiu's fears that we could lose something. But does it not say in the report that we can still have a committee that may advise? I just like Mary to expand on her thoughts on that. If that is indeed a thing, or are we going strictly with the 2 members on this committee?
I'm going to go to Madam Clerk on this one. Madam Clerk?
Through the chair, so there would just be one accessibility committee. So if we did choose to go with the Joint Accessibility Committee, 2 members from the community would sit on that, and we would not operate our citizen committee. So if you'd like to continue our citizen committee, we would be looking for contract help or position in some other way through accessibility, but we wouldn't join the joint committee.
Councillor?
Well, I think we won't know until we get going, and so I guess I'm willing to say that for the remainder of the year, if we decide to go that route, I'd be okay with it, knowing that we can, if it looks like we're losing something, that we can pull out and reform the committee that we have now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Desmarais?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would have to agree with both Councillor Bodner and Councillor Bagu. I do believe that the idea of having the joint committee would be a great benefit. There's no question there. But the loss of our local committee removes that local voice in very many ways. Those people that are now used to being able to speak to the people on the committee are going to need a place to be able to express their opinions, talk about their concerns. Possibly they may want to reach out to the Seniors Advisory Committee. I don't know. We've talked in the past about the idea of them having a lot of shared issues, and that may be a way to be able to include them. But removing their voice is not the way to go here. And I do understand that that's how it's set up, and I know it will be a benefit for the most part. But again, I really do have concerns with the people that are left wondering where do they speak, you know, where do they matter. So it's going to be a problem, and I would suggest we consider having the Seniors Advisory Committee take some of this on.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Beauregard.
Through your worship, to either the manager of human resources or to the clerk or potentially Director Bowles, how much money do we currently allocate to this committee?
Madam Clerk?
I don't know offhand, but it is minimal. It's not so much the committee's time because they are volunteers. They are working hard. It is a large component of it is the staff time that's not seen through that budget.
Councillor?
Okay, if maybe in the future if someone could send that along to us, that'd be great, because I see that there's a cost, according to this report, of $5,000 annually, and I'm not sure if that's in total or if there's other costs to that as well. So I would just like that to be clarified.
Madam
Thanks.
Clerk?
Through the chair, that is the total cost for the committee.
CAO Louis?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to speak to council a bit about the principle behind the report. I think that I don't want to get bogged down too much, or council to get bogged down. I hope I can put their minds at ease on the committee itself. I want to get bogged down on the role and the staff role. I would suggest to Councillor Beauregard's question, the amount is probably close to or approaching zero. I think the city does a good job. I'm a little bit embarrassed to admit this. The city does a good job when it comes to mobility and accessibility. And I think we don't do a very good job of recognizing that disability is more than just mobility. Disability is, accommodations need to be made for people who have non-visual disabilities, including in our printed material, our websites, our built infrastructure, and so on. And we really don't have a staff person whose job this is today. Joining this committee gets us, it's more of a shared service than it is outsourcing a committee. And in Niagara, there has been in pre-COVID a direction given to the CAOs, the 12 CAOs plus the regional CAO through regional council. I know the mayor would be aware of a staff report that went in March of 2020 about doing more shared services. So if you can imagine if 3 small cities in Niagara each needed a lawyer, but none of them had the budget for a lawyer 5 days a week, they could share the cost of a lawyer and each have 1/3 of a lawyer's services. That would get them the legal services they need at a fraction of, at 100% of a person, but a fraction of the cost. And that's really what staff are recommending here is we're gonna get this a pretty, I happen to know this person professionally, a pretty skilled individual who's going to help the city up our game on the staff side. Now, in terms of Councillor Demaray's point about how do folks get their voice heard, particularly the committee members, I would suggest, even though their voices are being heard now, we're not particularly good at implementing. And so this is going to help on the implementation side to me more. I think staff's suggestion, and I'll lean towards Mary here, Mr. Mayor, I think our staff suggestion is that those folks who were on the committee are where the 2 appointees to the new committee are chosen from. So hopefully that voice still connects the old committee to the new committee. But I would like to see staff move forward with this so that we get the professionalism on the operational side, and then we can maybe link in the community input. Second to that. And I'm not sure if Murray has anything to add, Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Murray?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I would just agree with Scott that our 2 representatives for this joint committee would come from our current committee. So they're still very much connected to us and a resource to the people that were previously on our committee.
Great, thank you. Councillor Beauregard?
I have no other questions at this time. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed? That's carried. Thank you, Council.
Mary, I'm getting some early signs here, potential internet interruption. Just let me know. Continue, but I'll let you know.
Okay, thank you. We may, Council, we may get interrupted. There is something going on. There was a storm warning coming out from the news earlier, so I don't know if that has anything to do with that. On to item 7.8, recommendation. I'll have Councillor Demaray and Councillor Beauregard move that this Chief Administrative Office Report 2021-163 be received for information. Councillor Demaray.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The report was quite straightforward, and I think it's a very good report. I just wanted to add a couple of things just a request to ask staff to reach out to the Seniors Advisory Committee, the Active Transportation Committee, and the Accessibility Committee. The individual members can be done via email, just to ask them if they have any comments on this, because I know for a fact that Seniors Advisory Committee and Active Transportation Committee have some real ideas about what's going on in the parks and what should be going on in the parks. So it's just another opportunity to touch base with the committees that have been working very hard in the city and getting some of their expertise on board and having their opinions noted. That's all I'd actually request.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Long?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor. I've taken note of that.
Great, thank you. Councillor Beauregard.
Through your worship to Mr. Long, there's one particular paragraph that states the city has 219 acres of parkland comprising 13 neighborhood parks, 8 community parks, 7 parkettes, and 4 large city parks. Port Colborne has 4.9 hectares of parkland for every 1,000 people. This exceeds best practices from other municipalities that typically provide 1 to 1.5 hectares for every 1,000 people. Who sets these standards? Is this a provincial standard, or is this just, just who sets those?
Mr. Long?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. So those facts and figures came from the city's Parks and Recreation Master Plan. That plan, which was, I believe, endorsed by council last year, was put together by a consulting group. They're in regular contact with industry associations and parks and recreation associations to kind of know what best practices are and what the current data is. So that's where we pulled that information from. So we are relying on information that we received from the consultants that I believe to be true.
Councillor Beauregard.
That's all. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. That's carried, Council. Item 7.9, I'll have Councillors Wells and Bagu move that Council award the project for the demolition of buildings at the abandoned Public Works Yard at 11 King Street, Port Colborne, titled The Project, to Tri-Phase Group, Inc. for the base contract amount of $72,304 plus applicable taxes. The Council approve a contingency for provisional items of $19,696 for estimated maximum quantities of materials and be awarded at the discretion of the Director of Public Works for use up to the amount that proves necessary. That staff prepare the contract by law and the City Clerk and Mayor be authorized to execute the contract, and that the previously approved funding for the project be financed as follows: $35,000 under account 20C-PW-L18 11 King Demolition, and $57,000 under account 20C-ED-L47 Tourism and Cruise Destination Business Case. Questions? I have Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have been communicating with Director Kalamoto and Facility Supervisor Thomas. I was very pleased to hear that there were no environmental issues related to that building, and that there would be some cost savings of roughly, $6,000, maybe even more, up to about $8,000 cost savings to the city on moving that. Maybe if through you to Facility Supervisor Thomas, if he could describe that it's not just a demolition, that there is more to it than the demolition. So maybe if he can describe what else is involved.
Great, thank you, Councillor Wells. Mr. Thomas?
Good evening, Your Worship. Through you to Council. That's correct. I mean, we have an ongoing services to that building or those locations, and that does prove to be a small and ongoing cost just for maintaining lighting and security in the area. There are some security issues, or have been, that have required some unexpected expenses on our end to maintain the security again. But bigger picture, this is part of the larger strategic plans as part of the cruise ship initiative that the city has been jointly looking towards over the last year or so, at least, or maybe even longer. But this is definitely phase one. There is some collaboration with the Seaway on this as well. And as the councillor mentioned, this is step one of hopefully a few.
Thank you. Councillor Wells?
Maybe I wasn't clear. This is, on top of this, the some of the material from this building will be, or most of the material, I hope, will be going through a recovery or recycling process. So this is not just a straight tear down, send to landfill project. So I think that we need to recognize that when we do these demolitions, or when we do these, we do look to do the right environmental thing, and that is to recycle and recovery as much as we can. And I was made aware of that today, and maybe in future reports we can highlight that a little bit more so that we can get some recognition as being as green as we can.
Great, thank you, Councillor. I have Councillor Bagu.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One quick question. The fencing on the south side of the buildings and I guess the horse barn, all the stalls in there for the equipment, is that included in this, or is that something that's totally separate that's going to stay up? Because I don't read anything about tearing down the fencing in the storage building, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Thomas?
Through your worship to the council, no, the fence that's existing along the south side of the building, although it does need a little bit of repair, contains the area not owned by the city directly behind the building. The large works yard to the rear is not included in this demolition and will also remain fenced. There has been some discussion that going forward, as this initiative advances, that be included as a marshalling yard. But in this phase of the project, it's not included. You're correct.
Councillor Bagu?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just under the impression that that yard was city property, and Mr. Thomas not confirming it's not city property.
No,
thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, just to clarify, the current building that we did use for public works is leased from the Seaway. The storage yard is another piece of property that the city leases from the Seaway. In between those two properties is a triangle piece of property that Bell Marine used at one time in conjunction with the Esso ship fueling station. So that is operated by the St. Lawrence Seaway, or it's owned by Transport Canada, but the St. Lawrence Seaway looks after that property. So that's a piece of property that we have never had use of. So our property is kind of on either side of it. It is a triangle piece with a driveway that is at the corner of the building, and right where our yard goes in, there's a small driveway there that used to go to a storage shed, and I think there were 6 when I worked for Bell Marine. There were 6 fueling tanks on that location. So that's under the auspices of the St. Lawrence Seaway Authority, and they'll look to, I'm sure, lease that out or use it with regards to the shipping industry. So, but the 2 properties that we have are the current building and then the former yard where we stored our equipment and materials. Councillor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Great, thank you. Councillor Danch?
Thank you. To Mason there. So it's way before your time. I think it was our old water treatment building that was there on King Street. Is that a part of this deal to clean up that area, or is that going to stay where it is?
Mason?
Through your worship, Councillor, the water treatment plant is not included in this particular portion of the project. The Seaway has expressed an interest in taking care of that building, whatever that means, on their own. That being said, the pump house is included, which was at one point connected to the water treatment plant, but we're not responsible for that building at this time.
Councillor?
That's fine. I just wondered if it was going down at the same time. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor. And that building may go down. There was a little over a year ago between our staff and the Seaway, we were looking at a joint contract, but they may try to save that building. We're not sure. So they'll let us know, but Mason is quite correct that they are putting plans in for that building. It has been leased to different entities since the water treatment plant left there in the early 70s, and but it is owned by the St. Lawrence, or Transport Canada, and then looked after by the St. Lawrence Seaway Authority. Any further questions? Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. That's carried. Item 7.10, I'll have Councilors Bagu and Bodnar move that council award the Procurement and Project Management Services project, to CIMA Canada Inc., the consultant, on an as and when retainer requested basis to an upset limit of $147,600, including applicable taxes. That staff prepare the contract bylaw and the city clerk and mayor be authorized to execute the contract agreement, and that the funding for the project be financed under account 210-PW-R41 over 1.5 years from the capital levy contingency. Councillor Bagu.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Reading this report, somewhat disappointed. Our staff are really great. Mr. Harrison, we got Mr. Shipakowski, Mr. Kalamutu. I think we're unnecessarily going to outside contractor where we can do a lot of this in staff. The urban forest management plan, I'm sure we can do that in-house. The storm damage investigations, I think our guys are the best to know where the leaks are, infrastructure, water, sewer. Our guys already have a list on what needs to be repaired and where it needs to be repaired. So I'm just not convinced, Mr. Mayor, that it's necessary to spend money for the next 1.5 years to tell us we have to dig up a road because we're having problems. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Kalamutu.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. Oh, sorry, Mr. Maybe CAO Louis would like to speak first.
Yeah, we could do that. Mr. Louis?
Wait until after his comments.
Thanks, Chris. Mr. Louis?
Sure, through your worship, I don't mean to pull rank, but it is probably a better tee up. Through your worship to Councillor Bagu, this report and this initiative is partly at my direction. As you know, the new director came on in November and December of last year, and I asked him to clear the decks. There's a backlog, a multi-million-dollar, maybe approaching $10 million backlog in capital projects. There's a multi-year backlog in capital projects. Some council members have mentioned frustration at the speed with which capital projects are completed, and ribbons are cut or doors are flown open or roads are driven upon. And I challenged Director Kalamutu to clear the decks without adding to staff. There are bottlenecks in our tendering process. I think there's bottlenecks in our design process. And the solution that the director came up with, I think, is, and I will let him speak, Mr. Mayor, was a temporary one-time influx of staff. Our staff can do some of this work, but if council is patient enough to allow it to take a few years to take place, then I think we could spend this money elsewhere. But this was a direction from my office to the Public Works office, and partly as a result of perceived interest from council. So if I misread that interest from council, I apologize. I'll hand it over to your worship. I'm not sure if you want to go back to council or back to staff.
I'll go to Mr. Kalamoto.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to council. As the CAO pointed out, we do have a backlog. This is a number of years that we have in backlog. So we are trying to basically work about 2.5 years in 1 year. As mentioned, I am fairly new, coming in December. Our manager of engineering is extremely new. He came in today. Alex Sellez, who is on this call, is also the capital project supervisor, is also very new within a few months. So just organizing, understanding what we'd like to do, and actually getting plans together. A lot of the work that this consultant will be doing is getting an understanding of our procurement, which we're also getting some assistance with. Myself and Director Bowles are taking a look at some efficiencies with regard to procurement. And so it's not necessarily just project management. It is project management when it comes to certain projects that staff may not have time to do, but it is also helping procure for other contracts, for other consultants, and helping us get through this backlog, and we know how to do. As the councillor pointed out, we do have excellent staff. I do have full faith in what we can do. We would just need some time. And with respect to that, we've had this opportunity, as directed by the CAO, to just get some additional help on a temporary basis to clear this backlog, to get some plans together so that as we move forward into the 2023 budget, we have plans, we know what we're going to be doing for the next 5 years, and we can go on and hit our cruise control and do what we can as a city. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kalamoto, and welcome, Mr. Salas. Trial by fire tonight. Councillor Baggio.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm seeing so many people I've never seen in my life before on the screen, so I'm getting used to people. Thank you for the information, Mr. Mayor.
New glasses, Councillor? Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. I just wanted to say thank you to Mr. Louie and particularly to Mr. Kalamoto. It takes a professional and someone who wants to move the corporation forward to recognize that at times one can't do it all. And I think we want to be a progressive community, and that backlog does nobody any good. Our citizens, the money sitting in the bank for projects we wanted done. So kudos to both of you for forward thinking on this and bringing that forward. That's all I wanted to say on that. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor. Any further questions? Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed? That's carried. Thank you, Council. Okay, next is correspondence item 8.3 is a letter from MP Peter Julian from New Westminster, Burnaby in British Columbia. It's seeking an endorsement for motion M84, Anti-Hate Crime and Incidents, and Private Members Bill C-313, Banning Symbols of Hate Act. I have Councillor Desmarais and Councillor Danch to move this to receive. Councillor Desmarais.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just like to ask that council would consider supporting this request to receive. Move it to support instead. This is about banning the selling and displaying of symbols that promote hate and violence against identifiable peoples or groups. I guess the best example would be things like swastikas, the KKK symbols, that sort of thing. And it's one of many steps that need to be taken to correct what's going on right now in society. So I think it's a small thing that we can do. It is a private member's bill. It's going to need a lot of support from across Canada, but it's a very important one. So I would ask that we support this.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Danch, is that fine with you? Second that? Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. That's carried. Thank you, Council. So there are no motions this evening. Are there any notices of motion? Seeing none, we have minutes of boards and committees. And we have the minutes of the museum board held May 18th, 2021. I'll have Councillors Beauregard and Bruno move that. Are there any questions to those minutes? Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. That's carried. Thank you, Council. Bylaws. I'll have Councillors Bodner and, oh, sorry. I'll have Councillors Bodner and Klaloff move the bylaws, but we will separate these for the one conflict for Councillor Beauregard, which is item 19.1. Any questions on item 19.1 and just noting the conflict? Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. That's carried. And then the balance, I'll have the same two councillors move 19.2, 19.3, and 19.4. Any questions with regards to those? Oh, there we go. Councillor Beauregard's now perpendicular. Seeing no questions, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Those are carried. At this time, I'll have Councillors Bruno and Desmarais move that Council do now proceed into closed session in order to address the following matters. Item 20.1, minutes of the closed session portion of the June 21st, 2021 Council meeting. Item 20.2, Chief Administrative Office Report 2021-188, pursuant to Municipal Act 2001, subsections 2392B, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or board employees. 2392E, litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board, and 2392F, advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. Item 20.3, Chief Administrative Office Report 2021-189, pursuant to Municipal Act 2001, subsection 2392B, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, and 2392D, labor relations or employee negotiations. Questions, Council? All in favor, please raise your hand. That's carried. We will reconvene. It is 8:54. We will reconvene in 10 minutes. Thank you.